Chapter 501, Whoever chickens out is the loser. Sitting in the easternmost part of the continent, Dargin bordered on the vast ocean in the east. The celestial islands stood in the ocean, which were home to many cultivators and some factions. Birds flew in the misty sky above the eastern ocean. Sword energies could be vaguely seen as they traveled close from the distant horizon and landed on the shore of the northern ocean. Then, they flew to the south. About 15 minutes later, the people flying on the swords saw a huge prosperous human city that was cut through by a canal. Looking from the distant sky, they could see this city was much larger than Half City. On the outer range of the city were rows of residential houses built with black bricks and white tiles, and the streets and alleys ran across each other with big and small rivers winding through the residential areas. 1/3 of the streets in the city were waterways, and they could see boats traveling in the rivers. In the center of the city stood exquisite small buildings with glass tiles and beautiful engravings, adding a sense of sentiments and a picturesque atmosphere to the whole city. Compared with the magnificent cultivation cities such as Half City and Black Dragon City, this city looked like a piece of warm jade submerged in water. "Is this Jua City?" many cultivators exclaimed while flying. "It might be." Yunini unrolled her beautiful eyes. "When we asked for directions, they told us this is the way, and it was past the 3 small cities. This should be the place." "Guys, look over there." With a shiver, Moxian suddenly pointed to the east of the sky. Among the flowing white clouds, 3 figures wearing simple white robes were traveling on swords, looking like immortals. Of course, they would have looked like immortals if the 2 girls trailing behind were not chatting with each other. Fenghua, the people in yesterday's Final Fantasy were so dashing, weren't they? "The girls in the movie are so gentle," Fenghua said cheerfully. "That girl named Tifa. I wish I could take her home. The antagonist is super dashing too." "Ah!" they shrieked in excitement. "Ahem!" Sutanji coughed lightly, showing her dignified look as their master. "Don't you think that your master is dashing as well?" She was about to show them her move that she copied from the movie. "Oh, we have company." Immediately, she resumed flying with the sword control technique and acted serious. "Sword control technique?" The people of the Morning Star Sea realm yelled in surprise and stared at them. Then, the 3 white-clothed girls flying with the sword control technique stared back at them. "Master, there's so many people over there. I've never seen such dressing styles before." "The girl wearing the green gauze dress looks familiar." Sutanji gazed at Ningbai. To her surprise, the green-clothed girl stared back at her. They stared at each other for a long while. Suddenly, Sutanji opened her mouth and yelled, "Isn't she that Biao who played the guitar and sang the boundless sea and sky by beyond?" "Miss Sprite?" Fenghua and Xin yelled out her QQID. "Ah, you are FCK. Black Demon blurted out an internet cussing word. "How come I feel like she looks like the UG immortal who beat me in the Legend of Mewtwo?" The Xiqi spiritual master also recognized Sutanji, and she shouted in astonishment, "Aren't you the Taoist friend who played a music from Guangling at the New Year's party?" "I saw her on Mr. Fang's live stream." "The one who went to the 3 cent factions." "You are." Sutanji's mind instant blanked out. Morning Star Sea realm. The people in the front only said 4 words. "Ah, ah!" Screams and shrieks rose in the sky. They knew that there was going to be a netizen meetup, but they were still astonished that people whom they only knew through the internet and lived in a place hundreds of thousands of kilometers away across the ocean would appear before them. After exchanging their internet IDs, many of them realized that they were friends on the internet, and a few of them, Sutanji and Ningbai for example, had talked about music with each other in personal chats. Also, Sutanji had encountered Zai many times when they played The Legend of Mewtwo, since Zai was the only wizard on Mr. Fang's team. Yuninian and Moxian were regular visitors of Mr. Fang's arcade shop in QQ, and Sutanji met them frequently when playing the King of Fighters there. Sutanji had just finished her work in the Liuyan Taoist Palace and was on her way to the internet cafe while flying on her sword. To her surprise, She had encountered so many friends from the internet in real life. It was amazing. She was excited, thrilled, curious, and a bit nervous. Although she had known many of them through the internet, she didn't know their personalities and backgrounds in the real world. Finally, she said to the group of people who came from afar, "Would you like to visit the internet cafe? You can meet the others while you're there. Let's go, let's go, let's go." Ha 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 ha. I feel like 3 seasons pass when I don't get online for a day. I wonder how it feels to get online in GeoCity. The cultivators of the Morning Star Sea realm were thrilled at this topic. Come on, let's take a group photo and show them. Let them be envious first. Ha 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 ha. It seemed like these people acted almost the same way as they did online. Sutanji laughed heartily and almost exposed her reckless personality, and she pulled some girls she was familiar with to her side. Smile. She pressed on the image saving button on her communication jade. Then, she copied the picture and posted it in all the group chats on QQ. Jiwoo said, "How come you're together?" Nalan Hongwoo chimed in. "You met them already? Where are they? I've never seen people from across the ocean before. Let me meet them." Song Kingfing inputted. Lin Xiao stared at the screen with wide-open eyes. "The girls of the Morning Star Sea realm are all gorgeous." Liang She, who was a player as experienced as Song Kingfing but rarely spoke in the group chat, voiced his thoughts. "Oh my goodness. I never thought that I could meet people from across the ocean in my life." Tang Yu asked, "You've seen each other already?" Mr. Fang chimed in. "Awesome. Congratulations on your safe arrival." While messages flooded the group chat, the people acting as hosts such as Jiwoo, Nalan Hongwoo, and Lanmo came out of the city to welcome the guests. Some players followed them out to have fun, including Song Kingfing, Dong Qinglai of GeoCity, Yi Xiao of the Cloud Ocean faction, Ling Wanian of Yuxi Mountain, and Li Longyuan of Xuanhuan's Hong Manor, etc. Dozens of flying swords flew up into the sky above GeoCity, presenting an eye-catching sight. "Do you recognize them?" Mo Tanxing said with a laugh. "I recognize one." Yan raised her hand and said, "I saw that white-haired old man once before. He can use sword 23. Super powerful." Black Demon shrunk his neck and said, "Quite a few members of the Royal Clan Guild." For a moment, he had a feeling that he would get beaten up. He had indeed come over through the internet cable, but seeing so many members of the Royal Clan Guild, he was afraid that we would be knocked down to the ground instantly. He. Tang Yuan was smarter and more adaptable to changes. "You must be Taoist friends of the Royal Clan Guild." He was all smiles. "Yuan old dog." It just slipped out. "FCKU. Scumbags of the Royal Clan." "FCK. You dare to call me a scumbag? I'll kill you in the game later." "Come on, let's battle outside the Earth City. Whoever chickens out is the loser." The others looked embarrassed and were at a loss for words. Chapter 502. Arriving at spiritual state. They have repaired the teleportation array. The ocean waves crashed against the reefs on the shore, and gales whistled stubbornly through the sharp rocks as if they were letting out unyielding cries between 2 stone cliffs. The 2 voices collided with each other in the winds. "Why didn't you stop them? It's a piece of cake for you to destroy the ruined array with a landslide or thunderbolts, right? These people know nothing but watching anime and playing games in the shop." Their voices suddenly vanished as if they were swallowed by the winds from the ocean. Not even a shadow could be seen. "What's happening? What's with the commotion outside the shop?" Waves of cheers came from outside the GeoCity shop. Subconsciously, some disciples of Linian Academy put down their virtual reality headsets and looked toward the door. "It's said that the people of the Morning Star Sea realm." "What? They are really here?" Suddenly, almost all the customers on the first floor of GeoCity shop stood up and craned their necks toward the entrance. Accompanied by a few members of the Royal Clan Guild and some regular customers of the shop, a group of people wearing clothes from unknown factions walked into the shop. Most of their faces were new. If one had to say that they were acquaintances, the people in the GeoCity shop had met some of these new people online. Look at her. She is the person who cosplayed as Chai's Urukigura last time. Oh my goodness. The guy wearing black clothes looks like the boss of the Black Demon Guild. Look over there. Aren't they the people of the Green Cloud faction? That's the Water Moon Master. They are not people of the Green Cloud faction. They cosplayed as people of the Green Cloud faction. I even see that the dumb guy who cosplayed as the White Brow Spiritual Master. The Reincarnation King quickly looked over with a dark expression. Damn. He can even hear us. Two figures shrunk and moved to stand behind the others. The two shop fronts stood on the opposite sides of the street. In the drizzle, people thronged on the street lined with houses of white walls and black tiles. The willow trees in front of the shops began to sprout tender green branches which danced with the pedestrians. Some passers-by holding paper umbrellas walked past the shops with swift steps. Overall, it looked like a beautiful ink landscape painting. Some girls took the rear while whispering among themselves. So, this is your city. Senior sister, I haven't seen so many ordinary people before. They all carry weapons with them. There are many warriors in this place. It's said that this nation was founded by a warrior. The guild president of the Royal Clan Guild is the emperor. It's said that the headquarters of the UI Taoist Alliance is somewhere to the west. Yan exclaimed, so many people are looking at us. She immediately stood straighter, enjoying being in the center of the attention. She liked this feeling. Welcome to Jua City of Darjin. Jiwoo welcomed them with hearty words. Then, he whispered something to a person beside him, and a thin and sharp voice sounded. Today, we will treat you all to instant noodles and iced red tea. Please don't be overly polite with us. Do you guys want to race the new movie? Do you guys want to watch Final Fantasy with us? Moxian and the others looked around. There seems to be nothing special about this place. Oh, is the mysterious Gong Xiao in this shop? This Gong Xiao had provided lots of guides for each game, and the players regarded him as a godlike existence. However, his technical posts were always made by others that gave him the credit, and no one had ever seen him. Where's Gong Xiao? Hearing the question, the crowd in Jua City shop split up and revealed a handsome young master standing before the counter. He wore a yellow robe and had a folding fan in his hand. Is he Gong Xiao? Xiao Yelf looked proud and said, that's me. I know everything up in the sky and down in the earth. I'm familiar with every detail about the shop's products from Resident Evil to Final Fantasy. You can ask me any questions you have. Ha 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 ha. So young and so brilliant. An awesome young man. Gong Xiao. Do you want to come and play a game with us? Xiao Yelf was at a loss for words. Fang Chi glanced at the system interface and saw that the sales of Final Fantasy were steadily growing. However, most people were still stalling. On the one hand, the Heavenly Academy mostly consisted of cultivators, and they didn't think that it was necessary for them to watch it. On the other hand, although people knew that this movie could increase their combat experience, few of them knew how much they would get out of. After all, it costs 100 crystals. Since only a small number of players had watched the movie, the visible effects of the movie were not obvious. Meanwhile, the cultivators of the Morning Star Sea realm went online and toured the nearby places in the company of the cultivators and warriors of Darjin. They enjoyed themselves very much. One day later, the teleportation array was activated. Their warriors mainly from Alinian Academy, Xi Academy, and Shengjing Academy and a few cultivators from the UI Taoist Alliance and other forces gathered before the teleportation array in Jua City. Is this the teleportation array? Although they had used teleportation arrays many times in the games, Song Qingfeng and even grand cultivators such as Su Danji were still amazed by the sight. It was the product of the ancient array disk and the array technology of the spiritual state. It had only existed in the legends. Meanwhile, in the Heavenly Academy Pooh, Gabriel was impatient. That's the best that the warriors of Heavenly Academy can do. Boom. He struck down his huge sword, which was taller than himself, with vicious force. Boom! With a huge booming noise, the stone on the ground shattered, and the ground around the tiles cracked. About a dozen warriors lay before him. They were warriors of the Heavenly Academy, and one of them was even the white-clothed manager of the martial field. "That's outrageous. Try to step over the line." The manager looked angry. "We already gave you enough time, and what is the result? You guys are so weak. Do you think that warriors from a bleak place can turn the tables? What a joke. They are just a bunch of bumpkins who don't know how to write the word martial. They are bugs that I can crush with one finger. If you can't bring out opponents who are powerful enough for me, I'll show no mercy to you." Gabriel Lupiling slightly frowned. What are they up to? What's the meaning of this exchange? They just want us to teach them our combat techniques and martial Dao. And they make it sound good and call it an exchange. Enough. We just got the news that a martial competition of 3 realms will be held in the Heavenly Academy tomorrow. I think the Heavenly Academy will give us a satisfactory answer by then. Standing beside Luo Piling, the blonde-haired girl looked eager at the prospect. "Sister Sire, you don't need to show your hand." Gabriel bowed elegantly and said, "I'll give those bumpkins a good lesson and show them what real warriors look like." He spread out his hands and said, "I even don't have to use my saber." I hope that they won't return with tears on their faces. Laughter burst out around him. Chapter 503, Every place is a scenery. The people were teleported in 3 groups. At this moment, the first group including the cultivators of Yuxi Mountain, Xuanhuan's Hong Manor, and other forces had arrived at the teleportation platform on Zixiao Mountain. The next group consisted of the cultivators of Darjin and warriors of the 3 major academies. "Did you mention it to young Master In?" Some soldiers of the Zhou army were whispering among themselves. Since they were serving in the army, they could come and watch the teleportation array but couldn't take this long trip due to their drills and duties in the military each day. "Of course, I did. What are you guys whispering about? You look mysterious," an officer of Zhou army asked. After a long pause, one of them answered, "Captain, you might not know this, but this kid got to know a super cute little girl and got her QQ from her. Since we are on duty, we asked young Master and to have a look of her for us." "A little girl in the Legend of Mia too?" The captain froze. "Yeah, her voice is super cute." That man touched his head. "She is a bit dull but very adorable." He. "Right. We used to take her to level up, and her ID is Luxioxian." At this topic, these soldiers got excited since they had never met netizens before in their lives. Although they couldn't go in person this time, even the thoughts of getting a closer connection was thrilling. Looking toward the teleportation array, they saw that it had been activated. With flowing spiritual light, the cultivators and warriors of Jua City soon vanished. The third group consisted of the cultivators and warriors of the Morning Star Sea Realm. On the teleportation platform on Zixiao Mountain, groups of people appeared from thin air. Looking around from the huge platform, they saw rolling green mountains engulfed in white clouds. The immense spiritual essence in this place was much more intense compared to the deserted sea realm. Even though they had no landmarks to guide them, they could tell that they were no longer in the deserted sea realm. Gathering on the teleportation platform in Zixiao Mountain, a large group of people couldn't stop expressing their amazement at the magical array which was left from the ancient times. The grand cultivators who came in the first group were exchanging greetings with cultivators of the spiritual state, looking thrilled. The young people behind them talked among themselves animatedly. "Young Master Song, how do you feel after your first trip through the teleportation array?" Lin Shao and the other young warriors' faces were red with excitement. "I feel dizzy." Song Qingfeng was obviously still feeling fuzzy. Yuninian, Moxian, and the other girls walked down the teleportation array, feeling dizzy too. "Senior sister, give me a hand." "Oh, I feel so dizzy." Yan almost dropped to the ground. "Don't yell. I'm dizzy too." Moxian complained. "No, I've got to sit down." "How was it? Are you okay?" The girls of Darjin walked up to help. Dong Qinglai said curiously, "We felt fine when we arrived." "How come you're so nauseated?" Nana Hongwu glanced at them and said, How come these girls have weak constitutions, eh? I feel a bit dizzy too. The Xiqi spiritual master patted her forehead lightly. Ningbai's face turned a bit dark. The teleportation process was so fast that most of the cultivators didn't have time to observe the process. But Ningbai was different. Laws of nature were the most mysterious and complicated knowledge in the world. The more complicated the laws were, the closer to the fundamentals they were. The dumb ones could only get a tiny glimpse of laws of nature even if they pursued them all their lives. The wise ones tried to understand the true meaning of the world by understanding these laws. However, the lucky ones were born with this knowledge. With a demon bloodline in her, she had talents that no ordinary people possessed. In one instant, she seemed to have seen many weird spatial tunnels hiding in the depths of the dark void. From one of the tunnels, something seemed to have looked toward them. She shivered uncontrollably. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." She thought perhaps it was an illusion that she got in the unknown darkness. Or maybe, someone else was also passing this place in the spatial tunnel. Meanwhile, the teleportation platform was bustling with people. A few old men met each other there. "Old ignorant Nalan, you are." "Old undead Song." "Ha ha ha ha, you are the damn old undead." On the other side, some young men gathered and whispered to each other. "Song Kingfing." Tang Yu pointed at the young man wearing the purple warrior suit and yelled, "I'm Tang Yu." "Yeah, I'm your big brother." Song Kingfing looked at the guy who used to beg for guides from him and said in surprise, "It seems like you are quite a figure here. You look more handsome than I imagined." "Of course," Tang Yu said while patting his chest. "Tell me if anyone dares to mess with you in spiritual state, I'll nail them." Lin Xiao replied, "Damn, good to know." Xiluo said, "You sound like a big figure, bro." "Let me introduce. That girl wearing white clothes is New Snow. And that is Miss Sprite." "What?" Tang Yu asked in a low voice. "New Snow is so young." "She looks younger than my little sister." "Let's go." Xuanhuan said, "Guys, today, I, Xuanhuan, am your host. I invite you to tour Yuanyang City, and you can pick up whatever you like. It's on me." "FCK. You guys are all this powerful here?" Xuanhuan said. "We have some power and face in the small spiritual state here." "Superb. Awesome." Tang Yu asked, "By the way, where's Harun?" As a fan of guns and machines, Tang Yu was most familiar with the artifact master of the younger generation. The Grand Artifact Master is of course in the group of artifact masters. "We are just ordinary people who can only play games." The young men yelled in excitement, but the girls looked more reserved. They talked in gentle voices, afraid to ruin their images in front of so many people. "Xiaoyu, come and give big sister a hug." "Oh, I haven't seen Xiaoyu for a long time." "Well, no hugs. It's embarrassing in front of so many people," Jiang Xiaoyu said in contempt. "Now, I'll introduce to you to my friends in the Heavenly Academy. They are Little Bai, Little King, and this is Little Bell. Guys, follow me to Yuanyang City." By now, all the people had gathered together. A large group of sword energies rose from Zixiao Mountain. Standing on the flying swords, they looked down and found that this place was more beautiful than the deserted sea realm. The winding mountains and green rivers were everywhere, and it was beautiful no matter where they looked. They felt like they had walked into a painting. "Wow! Is this the spiritual state?" "It's our Tang family over there." Tang Yu pointed in one direction. "Do you see the mountain over there? The Heavenly Academy is behind it. Over there is the relic of the ancient moon faction. I'll take you there someday." "There is no hurry. Let's go to the internet cafe first." "We're close to Yuanyang City now. Do you see that spiritual ship? We'll get there soon following its direction." Hearing the introductions from the cultivators of the spiritual state, the guests found that there were too many scenes for their eyes to see. Every place was a beautiful piece of scenery for them. Chapter 504, Mr. Fang got mocked. Since the warriors of the deserted sea realm were still in the early stages of development, their combat force was one large realm lower than cultivators. However, this system and calculation method didn't apply to the spiritual state. According to the legends, Their warriors in the ultimate West realm had inherited an ancient system. In the distant past, the Sky Knights rode huge dragons and flew from the western snow mountains, creating a long period of prosperity. No one knew why they had later fallen into a decline, but they still had a system as powerful as that of the cultivators. In this perspective, their warriors of the deserted sea realm who were in the early stages of development were no match. The king of the ultimate West realm was a top-level existence called the Blood Dragon Grand Warrior Empire. He was the most powerful warrior in the ultimate West realm, and he and his mount Blood Dragon were among the most powerful existences in the world. In the past hundreds of thousands of years, they had developed steadily in the bitter cold northwest and built cities in the ice-covered world. The brave warriors guarded the natural strongholds on the cliffs among the glaciers which were fraught with natural barriers, storms, and fierce beasts. The extremely cold ice and snow could even freeze the spiritual essence in cultivators. It was true that cultivators were usually more powerful than warriors, and a Western warrior was no match for a same-level cultivator of the spiritual state. However, the Western barbarians lived with their neighbors, the horned dragons in the ice-covered mountains, for generations, and they had signed the covenant in the distant past to cohabitat, which was why they were named after dragons. The two species had deep bonds and fought shoulder to shoulder in battles. This was the background of the four dragon families of the Western barbarians. As for the warriors of ordinary families, they had a system to tame fierce flying beasts and fought enemies together with their mounts. When fighting 2 versus 1 battles, there wasn't only the numbers advantage. The pure-blooded horned dragons not only had powerful combat abilities but also excelled in casting spiritual spells as well, eliminating all the disadvantages that warriors had against cultivators. In fact, the cultivators would be at the absolute disadvantage. It was why only Western barbarians had invaded other territories and not the opposite, where other people invaded the ice mountains in the northwest. Even when the heaven-seeking sword palace was in its prime, its cultivators didn't dare to go into the ultimate West realm by crossing that foreboding ice mountain range. That was why they didn't chase wanted criminals when those people escaped to the ultimate West realm. If the big families of the Western barbarians were counted as separated family, their general strength would be no less than any of the 7 ancient families with great inheritances in the spiritual state. Now, the ultimate West realm was like a lion wide awake while the spiritual state was like a huge dragon falling into a deep sleep. It's said that, while we were on the way to spiritual state, the number of ancient families in the spiritual state was reduced from 7 to 6. In the hotel housing the guests from the ultimate West realm, some elders of the Frost Dragon family were talking about the situation in the spiritual state. I heard of it too. Another elder looked grim. I wonder if it's true. If it is, it's truly unbelievable. It's most likely true. I've sent the information back home. I'm surprised that an ancient family in the spiritual state could vanish so easily. It is a big incident that had never happened in the past. It's said the Nangong family had the ambition to conquer the world. It seems that the other ancient families are not weak, and their combined force is naturally stronger than the heaven-seeking sword palace. No number. I heard another version of the story. It is said that their destruction was triggered by an outlander. Outlander? The elder sneered. An outlander? In their eyes, the cultivators of the spiritual state were the most powerful ones in the whole world. If it's true, the cultivators of the spiritual state have weakened greatly and are living backwards. From the looks of it, the spiritual state has indeed declined. I think they are postponing the martial Dao exchange to wait for the arrival of the people of the deserted sea realm to help them not lose much face. The brass bell sounded outside. The time is up. It's time to go. The people of the spiritual state are boring, an elder said. They want to hide their weakness and not lose face. But we'll humiliate them in public even more. In the martial Dao field of the Heavenly Academy, the atmosphere had become livelier than ever. Sword energies danced on the field with loud noises resonating all over the martial Dao field. On the field, a valiant-looking girl attacked and blocked with a double-handed heavy sword almost instinctively. timing each move perfectly. With his usual cold arrogance and a somewhat wicked expression, Gabriel sat on the high stand and looked down at the martial field with disdain. Mr. Fang had just arrived at this moment. By the time he took a seat groggily, the martial exchange had already been going for a while. "Boss. Jiangxi," or you called to him in a low voice while patting the seat next to her. "Here." "Hey." With a frown, Gabriel watched as the young man wearing a blue and white robe walked up with hands in his pockets and took a seat behind him. He was angry that this newcomer missed seeing his excellent performance before now. More infuriating was that this man looked as if he hadn't woken up completely. Before he lost his temper, the girl wearing a red dress and black armor walked off of the field and took off her helmet adorned with beast horns. Then, her blonde curly hair fell and fluttered like a waterfall, revealing the gorgeous face of a wild beauty. "Finished?" Gabriel said teasingly. "I'm surprised that it took you so long, Miss Saya." "It's a shame. I thought I would taste defeat for a moment." Saya sat down next to Gabriel and asked, "My opponent was good with double-handed sword techniques. He said that he learned them from a person named Cloud. Do we have such a sword master in the Ultimate West realm?" "In my opinion, he is someone from an unorthodox force. However, if he could force you to use your full force." Gabriel smiled and said, "Then, the martial exchange is a bit interesting." Mr. Fang was yawning, but he suddenly froze as he gaped and looked at them, wondering how she won this match. Although real geniuses are much stronger than ordinary people, this exotic girl must be a genius among geniuses. Seeing the astonishment in Mr. Fang's eyes, Gabriel snickered. "What? Is that warrior very famous here?" He looked disdainful as he continued, "But different warriors have different strength. I hope you people of the spiritual state understand it." Mr. Fang scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "I'm not from the spiritual state." Gabriel's narrow eyes looked more disdainful. "Are you from the deserted sea realm? May I ask if you guys from the deserted sea realm know martial arts? Maybe you just know dances?" TL note: martial arts is pronounced in Chinese as wushu, and dance is also pronounced as wu. Ha ha ha. Sitting behind him, a few young people of the Frost Dragon family burst into laughter with him. Chapter 505, Completely Unrivaled. "May I ask if you guys from Deserted Sea Realm know martial arts? Maybe you just know dances?" Exasperated, Mr. Fang said, "About this question, I don't know about the others, but I know a bit of it." Ha 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 ha. The people around him laughed harder, and Gabriel's voice had almost gone hoarse from laughing. "Then, you must carefully watch what the real warriors look like. They don't win with dance moves." At this moment, a lean warrior of the Heavenly Academy had defeated his opponent on the martial field, which was rare for the side of the Heavenly Academy. Immediately, cheers rose from the camp of the Heavenly Academy. Obviously, their warriors of the Heavenly Academy were no match for their peers of the Ultimate West realm since they had lost several matches in a row. Now that they had won one match, even Gatina looked better. Gabriel's face darkened. He beckoned, and a burly young man walked up. This man wore heavy armor and had brown hair. "His name is Alva, a master of the younger generation in our family." This time, Gabriel didn't speak using his awkward spiritual state language. He used the language of the Ultimate West realm. "Alva, you can take the next match." While he spoke, Alva had put on his face armor. With a furious roar, a brawny figure leapt down from the stands. In heavy armor, he landed in the center of the martial field with a resonating loud noise, holding a heavy long sword in his hand. Clad in the heavy armor, this man looked like an advanced and delicate war machine. Since he was also wearing a cold piece of face armor, the others could only see a face made of iron. Faint cold glints shot from his black eyes, and others who looked at them would feel suffocated by the coldness. That warrior of Heavenly Academy pulled back his long sword and bent his body like a hard bow that was pulled to its limit. His presence changed and was different from before. More importantly, the audience felt a surge of tremendous spiritual essence gathering in his sword. His opponent, the Western barbarian named Alva, slightly bent his legs like a puma hiding in the long grass, waiting to lunge at its prey. This move of his instantly induced exclamations from the audience. The cultivators and warriors of the Heavenly Academy looked angry, but Gabriel looked arrogant and proud. "What are they exclaiming about?" Mr. Fang asked. Hearing his question, Gabriel's face darkened. "You don't know that?" "However, this isn't surprising since this kid doesn't look like a master in martial arts," Gabriel patiently explained. "Don't you see that Alva shows no intention of using any combat techniques?" The moment he said it, they heard a long roar. Violent gales swept across the entire martial dove field, and the grey-clothed warrior struck out as his long sword turned into a blinding white beam of light. White rainbow. The grey-clothed warrior's strength was about at the 6th level of the Grand Ancestral Warrior realm, but this sword technique contained astonishing force. Like a long rainbow, the sword whistled across the sky like rumbling thunders. The wind created by the sword cut open the ground, leaving a deep groove in the floor. In the blink of an eye, the sword was before his opponent. However, at this critical moment, everyone saw the warrior named Alva make an astonishing move. Alva reached out his right hand and clenched forward before his chest. The sword light and the storm it carried suddenly stopped. A sharp sword was firmly caught by a hand covered in a gauntlet, and it vibrated in the hand. Almost all the warriors were shocked by this scene. Then, their warrior named Alva kicked his opponent in the chest and instantly sent him flying with force. Alva's move was simple, but it was the result of many life and death battles, showing his perfect timing. Everyone could see who was stronger in this match. Then, Alva cast a provocative glance at the stand, and he said in a loud voice, "I seem to hear that warriors of the deserted sea realm are very good." The people of the Ultimate West Realm all laughed at his words. "Anyone who dares to have a match with me?" The stands fell silent. Beside Fang Chi, Gabriel looked smug. "Alva is an elite fighter of our Frost Dragon family. He once caught a Frost Dragon's spiritual spell, the Ice Spear, with explosive force using one hand." Gabriel said with a smile, "Their warrior who fought with Sire must be their best trump card." Unfortunately, he encountered Miss Sire. He continued smugly, "Miss Sire, what do you think of this fighter of our Frost Dragon family?" "I heard about Alva." Sire wasn't fluent in the spiritual state language either, so she spoke in their own Western barbarian tongue. "He's a good fighter." At this moment, someone finally entered the field. He was a man wearing a suit of black warrior armor and carrying a big saber on his back. The people of the deserted sea realm were all very familiar with this figure since he was Liang She, one of the most experienced players in the shop. After getting a good placement in the Counter-Strike competition, Liang Shi was no longer short on funds, which was why he came to a spiritual state. Liang Shi stood there casually like an ordinary person who knew no martial arts. Level 9 of the Ancestral Warrior Realm. Gabriel lost interest in watching when he saw this warrior of the deserted sea realm. "I'm surprised by the overconfidence of this warrior of the deserted sea realm." After all, Alva had defeated a warrior at the 6th level of the Grand Ancestral Warrior realm. Saya also looked disappointed this time, and she said in the language of the Ultimate West realm, "I harbored a slight hope for the deserted sea realm." "Now, I know I thought too much." "Boss, what did she say?" Jiangxi Oyu furrowed her brows, feeling dizzy. These people sometimes spoke using their awkward spiritual state language and sometimes using their own language. She wasn't able to properly understand. Sitting nearby, a few other warriors of the Ultimate West realm talked among themselves, and they felt good about their powerful warriors. "What are they talking about?" This time, Mr. Fang didn't speak using the spiritual state language, which was similar to the language Fang Chi had used before he traveled to this world. Instead, he yelled using English, "Too young, too simple." The Western barbarians looked at him in bafflement. Displeased, Gabriel yelled, "Alva!" In the field, Alva coldly lifted one finger and waved it at Liang Shi. Gabriel asked Fang Chi beside him, "Do you think this warrior of your deserted sea realm can last one strike?" Mr. Fang looked embarrassed. "This? Probably not." "It's good that you know your limits." Gabriel smirked. Before he could finish, Mr. Fang added. After all, he might not even be able to use one move. What did you say? All the faces of the warriors of the ultimate West Realm turned dark. Meanwhile, a few cultivators of the deserted sea realm were talking among themselves. Old Liang has been watching Wind and Cloud, right? Which part has the Wind and Cloud come to? A while ago, it showed Nifeng learning the move called Completely Unrivaled. Chapter 506. Before finish using one move, Completely Unrivaled was created by Wu Wudi, the top-tier master of a generation in Wind and Cloud. It was divided into external techniques and internal techniques. The external techniques consisted of 10 combat techniques including 10 techniques of the saber, spear, sword, halberd, staff, fist, palm, leg, finger, and claw. Each of the 10 moves was among the most powerful of its kind in the world. The internal techniques were even more amazing since they could turn someone who was sickly and ill into an unrivaled master. When empowered by mystic martial internal technique, Completely Unrivaled had 3 ultimate techniques of offense, defense, and finishing off the opponent. After learning all these, a person could become almost completely unrivaled. With these powerful techniques, Wu Wudi even defeated the challenger Di Shitan, who was one of the biggest villains in the TV series. Wu Wudi had left the ultimate technique of offense, which was a part of Completely Unrivaled in Linian Cave, and Nifeng ventured into the cave later on and mastered this technique. Do you think old Liang has mastered Completely Unrivaled? Song Qingfeng asked the people around him. While Fang Qi said that the master of the Frost Dragon family might not be able to even use one strike, Alva beckoned at Liang Shi on the martial dell field. In the next moment, the audience including Gabriel, the elders of Frost Dragon family, the people of the Black Dragon family led by Liu Opiling, and the people of the Red Dragon family led by Sire, saw something unbelievable. Liang Shi's lips moved slightly and murmured, Completely Unrivaled. In the blink of an eye, Liang Shi vanished from everyone's vision. In the next instant, he transformed into blurry shadows, attacking Alva from all directions. The blurry shadows came from all directions, each using fist, palm, leg, finger, claw, or even weapons techniques. Alva could still handle them if they were ordinary moves. However, they were not ordinary techniques. The moves were exquisite, and they complemented each other seamlessly. There was no place to dodge or escape. After all, it was hard to block 2 fists using one, let alone facing 10 or 20 fists. Each attack was as powerful as fire and lightning, which could pierce metal and shatter boulders. Being one large realm higher than Liang Shi, Alva tried to block but failed after one moment. Meanwhile, Completely Unrivaled had just begun to unleash its power. Liang Shi pointed with 2 fingers, moving all the weapons on the weapon racks around the martial dell field with warrior chi, including sabers, spears, swords, halberds, and staffs, etc. Equipped with these weapons, Completely Unrivaled looked even more horrifying. Instantly, the weapons seemed to move like godly items with intelligence and life, as if they were controlled by horrifyingly powerful demonic gods. Before the weapons came close, the horrible presence cut open the air and the ground. What combat technique is this? Sure enough, before Alva could even use one technique, he was sent flying backward like a broken bag. The heavy armor on him was useless, and it was covered by deep, bloody cuts. If they were in a life and death battle instead of a practice match, he would have been cut into pieces. The people of the Frost Dragon family who were sneering looked like ducks whose necks were clenched. Their mouths opened wide but couldn't utter a sound. This scene totally went beyond their knowledge about the world. When did the warriors of the deserted sea realm become more powerful than those in the spiritual state? Impossible. It was unbelievable. What's impossible? Jiangxi Oyu glared at him and said, now, you know our strength, right? You know nothing but boasting. Compared with Jiangxi Oyu, who held her grudges for a long time, Mr. Fang looked relatively calm. You go and fight him, Gabriel said as he gestured at a young man sitting behind him. Obviously, this technique had consumed a lot of Liang Shi's energy. In contrast, was a master at the first level of the King Warrior realm, two large realms higher than Liangshi. He could overwhelm Liangshi with only his realm and cultivation strength, let alone other things. Gabriel glanced at Mr. Fang with provocation in his eyes. I don't believe that he will win this match as well. As soon as he said it, Liangshi said in the field, I didn't finish mastering the offense technique of completely unrivaled, so I'm not sure if I can control the outcome of the following moves. Are you sure that you want to try? Gabriel is at a loss for words! Exclamation mark. He stared at the martial Dao field with wide-open eyes. He is still not finished? He had beaten his rival so hard with the first part of the technique, and there is more? You're bluffing. Tabli said in a cold voice, I think you're afraid. He beckoned at Liangshi. Come on. Under the super-powerful technique, the weapons controlled by Liangshi shattered into pieces and fell to the ground. Then, Liangshi used completely unrivaled again. Leaping into the air, he swept up the shattered pieces of the weapons with the vital essence of mystic martial internal technique. At this moment, all the moves of completely unrivaled combined into one. His body shot down like a huge godly weapon descending from heaven with earth-shaking presence. Standing around him, people couldn't help but feel tiny in the face of the great power of nature. The ordinary people would lose the courage to raise their weapons and resist. However, their warriors of the ultimate West realm who had grown up battling fierce beasts were different. Are you kidding me? Tabli yelled and waved his huge saber, making a special pose. Combat technique, sky covering strike. Instantly, Tabli unleashed his full force. With his strength that was two large realms higher than his opponent, he used the technique and struck forward with horrifying sword energy. The gusts howled in the field, and the surging, turbulent waves of energy from the collision knocked down the bronze cauldron in the field and sent the weapons on the weapon racks flying like arrows. With an earth-shaking noise, completely unrivaled pierced Tabli's massive amount of warrior chi like a sharp sword, shattering his armor. Defenseless, the huge saber flew out from his hand with blood spewing from his hands. However, the power of this technique didn't stop. An elder of the ultimate West realm who was at level 9 of the Emperor Warrior realm instantly moved, and huge surges of warrior chi exploded between them. If he didn't show his hand, the Frost Dragon family would probably have lost one genius. Gabriel's face was livid. Seeing two masters losing to an unknown warrior of the deserted sea realm, he couldn't remain seated. I'll take the next match. He leapt into the martial Dao field. Shame on you. Your cultivation strength is so much higher. How can you fight with him? This warrior has fought 2 matches. Ah, warriors of the ultimate West realm so shameless. Gabriel's face turned darker, and he yelled using his awkward, improper spiritual state language, any of you can come and fight me. Obviously, Liangshi couldn't battle any longer after the great consumption of his strength. Even if he still had sufficient warrior chi, he was no match for Gabriel, who had a cultivation strength higher than the combined strengths of the previous 2 fighters. In terms of other people, Gabriel didn't think that there were people more powerful than Liangshi. Chapter 507. To learn this technique, you must start from zero. Geniuses were called geniuses since their strength and abilities far surpassed those of the ordinary people. This was why there were so few geniuses in the world. There was no way that they can pop up one after another. The combat technique that this warrior used was so powerful that the warriors of the ultimate West realm, who regarded themselves the best in the world in terms of combat techniques, began to look at him in a new light. However, this technique consumed lots of energy. Liangshi barely used it, and he seemed exhausted. It meant that this technique was very difficult, and not many people could master it. Gabriel didn't think that there would be a second person who could use this technique. In fact, he was right. Except for Liangshi, a talented warrior and an old customer who seldom played new games and concentrated all his attention in one subject, few people could use completely unrivaled. After all, no one was as talented as Nifeng, who could master completely unrivaled after watching it once. Any of you can come and fight with me. Gabriel's challenge was issued to the younger generation since senior warriors wouldn't be so brazen as to fight with him. At level 6 of the King Warrior realm, His cultivation strength was higher than anyone in his generation. In fact, their warriors of the deserted sea realm were in much lower realms compared to their peers of the ultimate West realm. Unless they mastered horrifying ultimate techniques such as completely unrivaled or Sword 23, it was impossible for the warriors of the deserted sea realm to defeat the warriors of the ultimate West realm. After all, apart from cultivation strength, the combat techniques of the ultimate West realm were more powerful than those in the spiritual state. One couldn't battle an opponent who was at a higher realm with only the sword control technique. He glanced around at the large group of people and said, "Do any of you want to come down and fight with me?" He looked toward the zone where the warriors of the deserted sea realm were standing, and he said provocatively, "Ever since I came to the Heavenly Academy, I've been bombarded with tales of how powerful the warriors of the deserted sea realm are. I watched the previous battle. This warrior is indeed good, but he's no match for me." Some audience members booed at him. At this moment, a figure leapt down from the stand and landed before Gabriel. Gabriel sized up this man and found that the latter wasn't old but looked more mature than him. This man's age was a bit older than Gabriel, but his cultivation strength was much lower. It was only merely at the peak of the grand ancestral warrior realm. At the most, this man only had one of his feet inside the king warrior realm. Wearing a set of black warrior suit, his imposing figure, deportment, and spirit were impeccable. "Liang Hayu! It's Liang Hayu!" Exclamations came from the audience. Liang Hayu was an instructor in Shengjing Academy. When Fang Qi flew with the sword control technique for the first time, he had passed and shocked an instructor of Shengjing Academy who was flying on a big eagle with a female disciple. This instructor was Liang Hayu. With exceptional talent in martial arts, Liang Hayu's status in Shengjing Academy was only lower than the Vice Academy Masters. Although he took the position of an instructor, he had only Xiao Leniu as his disciple. He never taught other students. As one of the initiators leading the disciples of Shengjing Academy to the Geocity shop, even though he had come to the shop later than Liang She, he was still one of the most experienced players. At this moment, their warriors of the Frost Dragon family sitting near Fang Qi looked impatient. They had been confident that Liang Shi would lose, but to their astonishment, he had defeated two masters of the ultimate West realm each with one move. It was a disgrace to them. Besides, the little girl, Jiangxi Oyu, looked at them in disdain and said that they were bluffing and boasting. It was hard to bear. This time, Gabriel entered the field, and their confidence came back. After all, Gabriel had defeated many masters of the Heavenly Academy. "Wait and see," a brown-haired young man said in a cold voice. "This time, you guys from the deserted sea realm can't win." "Gabriel won't be as careless as the others," another person said. He made it sound like the two warriors of the ultimate West realm had been defeated because of their carelessness instead of their inferior abilities. Seeing Mr. Fang's casual expression, their faces instantly darkened. "Sir, do you still think that the warrior of your deserted sea realm will win?" The girl named Xiao asked. "What do you think, miss?" Fang Qi chuckled. "I have confidence in the warriors of our ultimate West realm." Xiao's voice oozed innate coldness. "I don't think everyone can launch the ultimate technique like what the last warrior did." Pointing at Liang Hayu, she asked, "He doesn't know how to use that technique, right? Can you use the combat technique that is as powerful as the one before?" In the martial duel field, Gabriel curled his lips while he looked at the warrior who was only half a step in the King Warrior realm. He was one big realm lower than Gabriel, who was a level 6 King Warrior. "Do you think I'm as much of a wastrel as those before me?" Gabriel's face turned cold. "If you can't use a combat technique as powerful as that one, you don't stand a chance. Now, I'll give you a chance to use that combat technique, and let's see if it can defeat me." "I can't use that technique," Liang Hayu answered honestly. Hearing his words, Saya smiled. "Then, why do you think that he will win?" The analysis was logical and smooth, and it seemed like Gabriel would surely win. In fact, Gabriel had the same thought. He said with a smile, "Attack me with your full force. I'll let you attack 3 times before I fight back." So you'll have a chance to show us the combat antics of the deserted sea realm. Some audience instantly laughed at his words. Antics sounded like tricks played in a circus. Then he heard Liang Heyu add, "What makes you think we warriors from the deserted sea realm have only one ultimate technique?" Exclamation mark. Gabriel suddenly froze. Even Sire, Liu Biling, and the other warriors of the ultimate West realm froze at these words. Then, they burst into laughter. Meanwhile, their warriors of Xi Academy and Linian Academy were talking among themselves. Senior Liang had reached this realm long ago, right? How come his cultivation strength had gone backwards instead of going up? After all, even Elder Fu, a long-standing king warrior, had reached the Emperor warrior realm. Then, they saw Liang Heyu move his fingers and the long sword carried on his back unsheathed automatically before floating up in the air slowly. "We're not afraid of the combat techniques from the Outland," Liang Heyu yelled. "Don't underestimate warriors of the deserted sea realm. Today, I'll show you the innumerable sword returning to root." Puh. Su Danji almost spewed out the iced red tea in her mouth, and she exclaimed in astonishment. Did he destroy his original strength and start from the beginning again? He must be crazy. Chapter 508, Pray for Himself. What innumerable sword returning to root? Gabriel snorted as he thought, if it is really a powerful technique, how come I've never heard of it? You can't frighten me with a bluff. While thumping his chest, Gabriel roared furiously. I told you that I will let you attack me 3 times before fighting back. That is set in stone. Then, this young man just stood there without the intention of making a move. Is this guy stupid? Jiangxi Oyu exclaimed. Was he seeking death? How can a human body be harder than a weapon? Don't be so startled and ignorant. The brown-haired young man sitting near Fang Qi smiled and said, Gabriel is the ultimate genius of our frost dragon family. He was bathed in dragon blood since he was very young and had tempered his body into the legendary demon dragon body. Even the fierce beasts in the big snow mountains can't hurt him, let alone weapons. This young man looked proud while he spoke. Do you understand, little girl? His body is more powerful than combat techniques. Oh, is that so? Jiangxi Oyu said with a snort. He said that he will let his opponent attack 3 times first, but he is using combat technique along the way. Blue veins bulged on the forehead of this young man from the Frost Dragon family. At this moment, Liang Heyu let out a furious roar on the martial field. Intense sword energies swept up while his body emitted radiant sword lights. When the sword energies swept to his face, Gabriel immediately sensed their overwhelming power. With a grim face, he circulated his warrior chi, covering his body and face with tiny, vague, and dense scales. Even though he was in a defensive position, Gabriel's human features faded away, replaced by a half-human and half-dragon face. The armor on his body was instantly broken by sword energies, revealing a stretch of dark gray scales on his chest. Gusts and sword energies swept up in waves. Under Liang Heyu's control, endless bolts of sword energies swept toward Gabriel like a furious dragon. The bolts of sword energies hit Gabriel's chest, and a series of metal colliding sounds rang out as if Gabriel was made of metal. Ha 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 ha. Very good. Gabriel laughed wildly. Among so many people, you're the first one who could make me feel pain. Although you're one large realm lower than me, you should be proud. But if this is all you can do, Gabriel shook his head and said, it's not enough to challenge me. You are too arrogant. The invincible sword energies were bounced off by the dark gray scales that were covered by warrior chi. Then, they landed on the ground, shattering into pieces before these pieces flew in all directions. Did you see that? The brown-haired young man said proudly, this is the power of a genius of our ultimate West realm. It astonished not only Liang Heyu but the other warriors of the deserted sea realm. This guy is bit strong. Song Qingfing gulped down a big mouthful of iced red tea. Nalan Mingsu said with a nod, he's arrogant, but he's got the abilities to back his arrogance. Ansheng asked, can Liang Heyu defeat him? This animal is indeed fierce. It's hard to say. He can even block innumerable sword returning to root. Su Tanji gaped at the battle in the martial field. Meanwhile, their warriors of the ultimate West realm sitting near Fang Chi began talking among themselves in their own language. Gabriel is awesome. Show these warriors of the spiritual state and the deserted sea realm our strength. They had been defeated in a couple of matches, but now they could win back around. Sire said calmly, it seems like I'm right. I don't like Gabriel's personality, but I must admit that he has great abilities. Boss. Jiang Xiaoyu pointed at the people who were talking in their own language and said in a huff, what are they talking about now? Are they bad-mouthing us? Mr. Fang shrugged. They are saying knows you no die. TL note, knows you no die is a Chinese internet slang. Knows you no die, what's that? Jiang Xiaoyu asked in bafflement, I still don't understand. You won't die if you don't seek it, Mr. Fang explained. What did you say? Their warriors of the ultimate West realm looked over with dark expressions. They wanted to give Fang Chi a good beating. The moment they said it, their warriors of the ultimate West realm felt their huge swords beginning to shake. My sword? Why did it fly away? My rock hacker? My steel breaker? Beside them, Sire yelled in alarm as well. My blood thorn. Different from cultivators, most warriors carried their weapons with them all the time. Now, these weapons all flew out. Sire's fierce-looking, double-handed great sword flew out. Besides their swords, all the swords that were not inside storage spiritual artifacts clinked and clanked. While the swords cried, a prolonged dragon roar-like noise resonated in the sky. Then, all the swords, including the great swords, the ordinary long swords, the precious swords carried by the warriors, the practice swords on the weapon racks around the martial field, and even the black spiritual sword that Nalan Hongwu carried unsheathed themselves. This Mu King, Bei Ai, and Li Lanruo were sitting with Jiang Xiaoyu instead of the other disciples of the Heavenly Academy. They yelled in astonishment, Sir, this is still the initial move of innumerable sword returning to root. But how come it feels different from before? Jiang Xiaoyu had taken out a bag of potato chips and was eating, and she had handed some to her friends. Hearing this, she said, you didn't watch the TV series carefully. A moment ago, he used the version that Master No Name showed with 10% of his strength. Although Liang Hayu had used more than 10% of his strength, he obviously hadn't used his full force. But now, suddenly, Liang Hayu pointed his index and middle fingers at the sky and bent the other hand before his chest. In the sky, many swords rotated around him like a dragon. Then, he yelled, I'll show you the shocking power of the true innumerable sword returning to root. Liang Hayu shook his arms. Under his control, the many swords in the sky split up and transformed into two fierce dragons. The dragon-like swords roared fiercely while they shot toward Gabriel with horrifying sword spirit. Gabriel felt desperate when he saw the huge swords. Among them were some swords that he was very familiar with. Rock Hacker was a sword made with the techniques of the Frost Dragon family. The star iron in the sword was mixed with a special ancient process and could shatter hard rocks with ease. Steel Breaker was a sword of the Black Dragon family. It could instantly break the opponent's weapons when they collided. Bloodthorn, a huge double-handed sword, was a godly item of the Red Dragon family. It contained a dragon slaughtering curse from the ancient times and could open hard scales of huge dragons with one touch. Also, each slash could weaken the opponent's strength. Gabriel couldn't block these three swords, let alone the many sword energies behind them. At this moment, Gabriel froze while he stared at the storm of swords crashing toward him. He was stupefied. The elders of the ultimate West realm couldn't tend to other things, and they were busy yelling, hurry, hold the swords, hold them down. They just didn't have time to help Gabriel. He was on his own, and he could only pray for himself. Chapter 509. Combat techniques are so powerful. Let's compete with sword techniques. At this moment, Gabriel could no longer think of his prior promise of letting his opponent attack 3 times. With a long roar, he gripped his huge sword tightly. The ground shattered, and everyone here felt the violent shaking. Gabriel was swallowed by the giant storm of swords. Will that guy die? Xuanhuan whispered on the audience stand. He was so arrogant, he can blame no one if he's killed by one attack. Yan whispered back while sipping iced red tea. At this moment, the Heavenly Academy Master, the masters of the ancient families, the elders of the Black Dragon family, the Red Dragon family, and the Frost Dragon family of the Ultimate West Realm all stood up from their seats. The spot where Gabriel was standing had been turned into a ruin. Swords pierced into the cracks on the ground like messy teeth, and the shattered ground sank and formed a huge crater made by swords. When the dust settled down, the audience cranked their necks toward the center of the sword crater. Ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha. Suddenly, a hysterical laughter came from the sword crater. A blood-covered figure was half kneeling in the center. Gabriel slowly lifted his face, which was covered in dragon scales. Supporting his body with the huge sword in his hand, he hadn't fallen to the ground. A black-armored old man with a brown beard said from behind Liu Bieling, "Why didn't you stop it? This kid is too hard to kill." Liu Bieling took a deep breath as if he was still digesting the unexpected situation. "In fact, I didn't know that the warriors of Deserted Sea Realm would be as strong as this." Andrew touched his forehead as if he was having a headache. "This should be the limit of their abilities, right?" "I suppose," Liu Bieling answered, but sounded uncertain. If it were in the past, he would answer with certainty. But now, he didn't feel so sure. Ha 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 ha. The elders and young disciples of the Frost Dragon family laughed along. "I didn't misjudge this kid. Their warriors of our Ultimate West Realm are unrivaled. Come on and use all your techniques." But at this moment, the two opponents were too exhausted to use any techniques. Gabriel didn't even have the strength to stand up. He could do nothing but try to recover his strength where he was. Liang Hayu was in the same state. After using innumerable sword returning to root twice, he used all the warrior chi in his body. He stood there and panted heavily. After he mastered the innumerable sword returning to root, he hadn't encountered such a powerful opponent as Gabriel. "I admit that the warriors of Deserted Sea Realm are indeed powerful," Gabriel said in a cold voice, "but I will not be defeated." He took out an exquisite crystal bottle from his storage spiritual artifact. The red liquid in the crystal bottle glittered in the sun. "Is this dragon blood essence?" the young men of the Frost Dragon family yelled. "This is the holy item that only warriors with the demon dragon body can take. It shouldn't count as a potion. He can use it to come back to life even if his head was chopped off. Gabriel will certainly win." Saya also heaved a sigh of relief, astonished by the great power of the warriors from the Deserted Sea Realm. However, in the end, their warrior of the Ultimate West Realm was going to win. Despicable. Shameless. How can he drink potion while having a practice match? Even Mu King, who was sitting behind Jiangxi Oyu, cussed in a fury. How can he be so brazen? The brown-haired young man of Frost Dragon family immediately retorted, "Are there rules forbidding taking potions? Besides, it's an item that goes with his demon dragon body. Why can't he use it?" Liang Hayu froze and then looked toward the audience. "Can he do that?" "I neglected this," Gatinian said, "but since we don't have this rule on the book, he can do it." Ha 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 ha. Their warriors of the Frost Dragon family laughed. "See, who said that he can't do it? I'm furious." Jiangxi Oyu stomped her foot in anger. "How can he do that?" Li Lanruo and the other girls also looked angry. After being wounded so severely, Gabriel would surely collapse before his opponent. They had expected to win the match, but now it seemed like the result would be different. However, the audience was stupefied by what they saw next. Liang Hayu took out a bottle of iced red tea from his storage spiritual artifact and opened the cap before taking 2 gulps. Ah! It was delicious. Then, he stood up and walked forward. At this moment, Gabriel hadn't recovered yet. He couldn't do anything but watch as his opponent walked toward him. Flame sword technique. Ah! With a scream, Gabriel fell into the sword crater. The smiles froze on the faces of the elders of the Frost Dragon family. Hurry, get down and check on him. Feed him a dragon blood pill. They scrambled to help. The players of the Deserted Sea Realm and Heavenly Academy were reacting differently. Ha 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 ha. Awesome. You think your dragon blood essence is good? Have you tasted our iced red tea? Their warriors of the ultimate West Realm were stupefied. How could things end up this way? Cheating. It was cheating. An elder of Frost Dragon family jumped up. We should forbid taking potions during matches. I didn't take a potion. Liang Hayu showed him the iced red tea and said, I just drank some of this beverage. It's super tasty. Do you want to try it? The elder looked murderous. How could this be a beverage? Sire frowned. Elder Lumingwai, you are most familiar with the spiritual state. Have you heard of warriors of the Deserted Sea Realm before? No. Elder Lumingwai of the Red Dragon family said, I visited the spiritual state the year before last year, and I didn't hear anything about warriors of Deserted Sea Realm. How come they are so powerful yet no one had heard of them? Sire thought. They hadn't heard of these guys before. How come these guys were so powerful? At this moment, their warriors of the ultimate West Realm had obviously realized that the people of the Deserted Sea Realm weren't as weak as they had imagined. The two warriors had used two different combat techniques, each of which was shockingly powerful. In terms of combat technique, only the Blood Dragon Grand Emperor warrior, the most powerful warrior in the ultimate West Realm, deserved to learn combat techniques on this level. However, two warriors of the younger generation of the Deserted Sea Realm had mastered two techniques on that level. Did the Deserted Sea Realm suddenly get two super geniuses in this generation, or, despite their thoughts and dread, they still refused to admit defeat? After all, only a few young warriors were defeated, which wasn't enough to scare them off. After all, they had seniors with them, right? They found it hard to accept the fact that their young warriors had been defeated in a row. An elegant-looking elder stood up. He was wearing a wide, white silk robe in a style different from that in the spiritual state, and he said a few sentences using the language of the ultimate West Realm. Sire said, this is Elder Chekhov, and he wants to have a sword technique match with you guys. A sword technique match meant that combat techniques weren't allowed. The sword techniques used by the warriors of the ultimate West Realm were inherited from the ancient times. Their ancestors had created and improved many combat techniques while they fought life or death battles with fierce beasts in the bitter cold snow mountains, and these techniques had been passed down from one generation to another while being refined further. You have powerful combat techniques? Then, we won't compete with combat techniques or ultimate techniques. Let's compete with sword techniques. We don't believe that you can defeat us in this area. They just didn't believe that they had a chance of losing. Chapter 510, How come you warriors of Deserted Sea Realm seem to know everything? Compete with sword techniques? Their warriors of the Deserted Sea Realm exchanged a look of bafflement. The so-called sword technique match meant that the opponents would compete with only sword techniques instead of ultimate techniques, which was categorized as combat techniques in this world, or cultivation abilities. In such battles, the participants were forbidden to use powerful techniques such as completely unrivaled. The Frost Dragon family had easily defeated many masters of the Heavenly Academy before the warriors of Deserted Sea Realm participated. However, when the warriors of Deserted Sea Realm entered the contest, the Frost Dragon family received 3 pathetic defeats in a row. How could they take this with grace and endure it? They had seen the great power of the combat techniques used by the two warriors of the Deserted Sea Realm in the previous matches, so they intended to avoid this area and have matches in another area. They didn't expect that they could defeat their opponents in a landslide, but they must win at least one match to redeem themselves. Otherwise, the Frost Dragon family would be disgraced if they were totally defeated by the warriors from a place that others didn't even know about. When Liang Hayu used innumerable sword returning to root, he summoned many swords from the audience. Some of them had been delivered back to their owners, and some people just walked down to fetch their swords to avoid all the trouble. Nalan Hongwu was one in the latter group. At this moment, Chekhov repeated his request for a sword technique match. I'll take this match. Nalan Hongwu said nonchalantly. Seeing Chekhov having a huge double-handed sword, Nalan Hongwu pulled up a great sword from the ground. While glancing at the young man of Ultimate West Realm who came over to fetch this sword, he said, "Let me borrow your sword for a while." Ah, he's going to use a great sword. His words astonished not only warriors of the Frost Dragon family but all warriors of the Ultimate West Realm as well. After all, their warriors of the spiritual state were used to single-handed long swords. From the previous matches, they could tell that the warriors of the Deserted Sea Realm were used to single-handed long swords too. In other words, only warriors of the Ultimate West Realm liked using double-handed great swords. However, this warrior of the Deserted Sea Realm picked up a double-handed great sword that was as thick as a door, wanting to use it a sword technique match. Chekhov instantly yelled in a fury, "I'll make you regret trying to show off your techniques in front of an Emperor warrior." HMPH. I'm surprised at the arrogance of the warriors of your Deserted Sea Realm. Saya had been calm, but now her pretty face turned livid with fury. Since Saya was already like this, their warriors of the Frost Dragon family were even more furious, and they yelled, "Beat him, show him our power. He's tired of living. How dare he show off his double-handed sword techniques in front of Elder Chekhov." In fact, none of them thought that warriors of the Deserted Sea Realm could use double-handed great swords. The double-handed great swords and single-handed long swords were both swords, but they had two different systems of techniques. It meant that people couldn't use double-handed swords with single-handed sword techniques. When Chekhov saw the white-haired old man grasping the double-handed huge sword with the single-hand sword posture, he sneered and thought, "This guy doesn't know how to use double-handed swords. I'll surely defeat him." With an explosive roar, Chekhov leapt high into the air, hacking his huge sword towards Nalan Hongwu with overwhelming wind pressure. It felt like he was holding a huge mountain in his hands and attacking Nalan Hongwu. In the next instant, a sword light flashed. Nalan Hongwu lifted the huge sword that was about 100 pounds, but it seemed like he was holding nothing. Faced with his opponent's lightning speed strikes, Chekhov retreated a dozen steps with alarm. His robe was hacked open in the chest. If he didn't dodge in time, he would have been hacked into two halves. What is this sword technique? Before he could come up with an answer, Nalan Hongwu moved forward and leapt up into the sky with both hands gripping the sword. It was the same type of drop strike. Compared with Chekhov's move, this strike was as heavy as a mountain and was also as fast as a bolt of lightning. Cloud? Song Kingfing instantly recognized it. Senior watched Final Fantasy as well. Boom! The ground shattered under Nalan Hongwu's sword. The ground before him exploded and turned into a huge crater. "You're not using your great sword properly." While looking at Chekhov, who kept dodging, Nalan Hongwu said calmly, "Watch my great sword technique." While he spoke, Nalan Hongwu shot out like a cannonball. Chekhov was alarmed and knew that stuff was about to go down. He dodged one slash, but Nalan Hongwu's great sword seemed to turn weightless and continued to hack toward him. The repeated strikes were as heavy as a mountain when needed and were as fast as lightning when required. Nalan Hongwu used this technique to the teeth, and it felt like he wasn't a human but a complicated war machine. Each technique and every move were the best way of killing. They looked extremely simple, which shocked Chekhov even more. Only geniuses with great combat talent could reach this realm after many battles. This white-haired old man has reached this realm. While Chekhov tried his best to block his opponent's storm of attacks from all directions, Nalan Hongwu drew out his single-handed sword from his waist. With the great sword in one hand and the single-hand sword in the other, he used both swords at the same time. Their warriors of the Ultimate West Realm felt blinded by this scene. "The person who battled me said that he learned his sword technique from a guy called Cloud, and this old man is using the same sword technique," Saya said in a daze. "Is this old man Cloud?" "You know nothing." "Don't say such nonsense." Jiangxi Oyu explained while crunching on potato chips. Senior also learned the great sword technique from Cloud. Although the players watched the same movie, Nalan Hongwu could use much more powerful sword techniques compared to the ordinary players who had watched Final Fantasy once. After all, he had swept across battlefields since he was young and excelled in all kinds of weapons with abundant combat experience. Besides, he had played the Paladin character and Devil May Cry, and thus he had a deep understanding of various systems of sword techniques. At this moment, their warriors of the Ultimate West Realm watched in a daze as Chekhov was getting beaten by a warrior of Deserted Sea Realm with a double-handed great sword. They were at a loss for words. With two swords in hand, every single one of Nalan Hongwu's attacks was the same as if two sword masters were moving. His great sword and long sword worked together seamlessly. Chekhov's defeat was inevitable. Impossible. I don't believe it. After Chekhov was defeated, another incredulous elder leapt into the field. 3 minutes later, he was knocked down onto the ground. Let's compete with only double-handed swords. Don't use single-handed swords. Another elder leapt down onto the field. This time, let the young people under 20 years old compete. This time, let's compete with saber techniques. They even discarded swords. This time, let's compete with fists. They discarded weapons this time. They had many matches. How come you warriors of the Deserted Sea Realm seem to know everything? Sire suddenly realized something and gasped,